this poem is set in the Mallee. It's called the Croquet Match. And one of my inspirations for writing stuff was when I came down to Melbourne, started going to folk clubs, they'd always be singing the Ryebuck Shearer, sometimes 2 or 3 times in the one night. And I sort of got sick of these songs about New South Wales, Queensland. It wasn't much about Victoria, and it's all about drovers and shearers. And I looked around the audience or the people who were singing, and none of them had been out of the cities. So I thought I'd write about my experience from my parents from Menangatang down to Maffra, the farming experiences we had along the way there. Anyway, this one's Croquet Match. It mentions hitting a paddy melon with a sledgehammer. Now, I'm not referring to the cute little furry marsupial. Here's a prop. I'm referring to the paddy melon, which is a noxious weed imported from Africa, and somehow it's taken over the country up there. And they're not really like this nice little nugget pumpkin. They're about the same size, they're green, they're spiky, and they're very dry and fragile. Shearers in the bar were bragging of the great deeds they'd all done. When it all came down to tin tacks, it seemed they all could shear the ton. And as they heard each other's yarns and said they could better them by far, no one heeded the little swaggy brooding darkly at the end of the bar. Now, for all the years he tramped about getting work where'er he could, this bloke had always suffered from shearers and their yarns of how they're so good. So now as he listened to their talk, he was burning up inside, and to bring him down a peg or two, he did there and then decide. Now, the biggest and ugliest shearer was a bloke called Bluey Spawn, and he chanced to remember this swaggy from a station he'd once been on, and he recalled him as a duffer who was troubled to open a gate. So with a wink to the rest of his cronies, he yells, "Well, if it's Stinky, me old mate." Now, Stinky was, at the time, engrossed in the fouler schemes. This shearer blurting out his name must have upset him in his dreams, because he still gave way beneath him in his little cry of dismay. He disappeared from the sights of all, and to the ashtrays found his way. Now, this is another aside. Back in my day, there used to be ashtrays around the foot of the bar, and people could smoke in the bar, and they just chucked the stuff into the ashtray where it was smouldered away. Anyway, so it's very unhygienic back in my day. Well, amid much coughing and spluttering, Stinky casually regained his seat, and with as much composure as he could muster, this shearer he then did greet. "Why, it's Ryebuck Spawn, I do declare. Just fancy meeting you here." And to a chorus of laughs from the shearers, he proceeded to spill his glass of beer. "Oh, get over with you," the barmaid cried. "Leave the poor little bugger alone." "Oh, if you don't mind, Miss Swaggy said, "I can handle this on my own. Now, you shearers think you're pretty smart, though far be it from me to say, but there's something I think I can beat you at. That is, if you're willing to play." Well, Bluey damn near cacked himself, and his sides near split apart from laughing at this little bloke who seemed to be so flamin' smart. So when he finally caught his breath and eased his face of its toothless grin, he said, "I'll take you on at anything, mate, and here's 10 quid to say I win." Now, this caught Stinky out a bit, I guess it's needless to say, because there wasn't a game on all the earth that the silly bugger could play. But he decided in this time of stress that he'd better play it cool, and he says, "Oh, well, we'll take you on at croquet, mate, though I don't suppose you know the rules." Now, when it came to reckoning, and all was said and done, when you compared their knowledges of croquet, they matched up none to none. But Bluey opened up his trap and said, "Oh, I haven't got a clue." So Stinky sighed. "Oh, we'll need an umpy. I guess I'll just have to do." Well, they assembled then outside the pub, and a croquet course was set. But Stinky wouldn't strike a blow till all the rules were met, and as mallets and croquet balls weren't bountiful up the bush, they had to use dried paddy melons with sledgehammers to give them a push. They tossed a coin, and Bluey won and elected thence to bat. He thought he could give the stick a shake if he had a decent whack, so he lifted high his hammer No one's over there, good, in case I let go. And he swung through nice and clean, to be lost in a great big cloud of dust, rising where the ball had been. Oh, to smash the ball to pieces like that is not allowed, old Stinky said with glee, and Rule 27 clearly states that's 50 points to me. And learning thus from Bluey's Blue, he gently nudged his ball, but it stopped well short of its goal, the peg. In fact, it hardly moved at all. Well, the game went on in likewise style through that weary afternoon, and though Stinky's ball never moved that much, his lead, it grew and grew, because Bluey always made mistakes whenever he hit the ball, because he didn't know the rules. Oh, but Stinky knew them all. Well, at last the poor shearer had had enough, and he had to admit defeat. This was certainly not a game at which Stinky he could beat, and when the score was tallied up, the swaggy had clearly won with a tally of 3,572 to the shearer's 21. Thank you.